So why did we become a charity? People kept saying, why aren't you a charity? More recently, within the last couple of years, even some of those previously that we didn't have to have specific charitable status are now saying, no, if you're not a charity, you can't apply.
Small charities make up the majority of the sector, but they receive a tiny fraction of all donations. We think they deserve a bigger slice. Welcome to Bigger Slice. I'm your host, Luke Wilkinson, and I'm joined today by Mark Hornsey, co-artistic director of Babbling Vagabonds theatre company. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Luke. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, pleasure.
First of all, just for our viewers and listeners, would you tell us a little bit about who you are, Babbling Vagabonds, what you guys do? And we'd love to then dive into hearing about your journey with fundraising.
Sure. So Babbling Vagabonds, we're 26 years old as a company now.
Not as people.
No. Only just a few years older. We started very young.
Started it when you were 8. Yeah, I see.
The three of us who set the company up, the founders, are still the three core members. We're still grinding the, whatever the expression is. Still the same three who set it all up those years ago.
Yeah.
We started out as a theatre company solely. That was our main aim, is to create theatre. Very quickly, we were invited by people in the audience to would we come into schools? Would we come into their communities, village halls, and that sort of thing? And very quickly, we started mixing all of those things into our offer. In 2023, we became a charity, and that shifted us again into really trying to focus exactly what we were offering, because for about 23 years, we basically took what came our way.
Yeah. Okay.
We did very little marketing.
Yeah.
But what we did raised our profile enough and got enough interest so that we were continually working and pretty busy for that entire time. And then when we became a charity, we sort of had to grow up a bit, I suppose, and start thinking about very clearly what we were offering, where it was going, and why we were doing what we were doing, and the benefit that we can offer out.
Yeah. Okay.
I suppose just on that, what we've really focused in on in the last few years is rural theatre and rural community arts, and how we can use the theatre skills and storytelling and making skills that we've got in-house to enable other people to tell their story or to find a passion about what they want to do creatively.
And that's something you're beginning. Actually, not beginning. You have years and years and years of experience and expertise in delivering really dynamic and engaging rural theatre.
Yeah,
participatory outdoor stuff with people
and celebrations. I think. Yeah, we call ourselves a theatre company, but we've always thought about the celebration. So when we're working in a little village, and they want to celebrate, a year of cold weather, we go in and we work with them, and we might have a story that fits that. We might have to make a new story with them, but we'll often end up doing a little bit of theatre and a whole lot of story making with the community and telling their stories back.
So can I ask you a little bit about how you've been funded historically?
Sure.
And also what day-to-day makes up the fundraising, the sort of income mix for you guys at the moment? Okay,
so prior to being a charity, we had mainly Arts Council funding.
Okay, so grants,
a little bit of awards for all.
For specific
very much
programs.
Project by project.
Yeah.
So for that entire 23 years prior to being a charity, I would say that all of our work was project by project.
Okay.
Some of it was funded and some of it was what we now would call commissions, but back then we were basically only, if someone said, can you come and work with us to do this? We would sort of scratch our heads and come up with our creative, fun way of doing that.
Okay.
So helping people tell their stories.
But paid for commissions.
Yeah.
And then tickets for shows and...
Yeah, if we go back, say, 12, 15 years, there was a lot more schools work around, and we probably had 70 or 80% of our work was in education.
Okay.
And in that time, that was our main way of making money. We do theatre shows, which we take into schools, and then supporting workshops. the shows would also be the same shows we would then offer to venues and to communities, rural touring, small villages. And that over the years that sort of shifted.
I wonder what happened in the last 15 years or so.
Change of government,
socio-political climate.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, slight changes. I mean, to be honest, though, it carried on for quite a few years.
Okay.
Under the Tories, but I suppose that increasing cutting in every area sort of forced us more and more, and eventually we don't really tour to schools anymore. We do bespoke projects with schools, and that sort of leads into
actually, from knowing some of your work, sometimes that's because you've received funding to work with the school, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like actually the flow of funds has turned direction rather than school has money to pay you. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah.
And so schools education sort of finished, and that was picked up there was still quite a good touring network then. So we were then picking up some of going to venues, and also councils had a bit of spend. So we had a bit of money. They had a bit of money to get in community projects, often in cities or urban spaces or towns. Then that's sort of become more and more challenging. Then we lent in on, this is our earned income, generally speaking. Then we lent in on the public, so family audiences. So we were performing to family shows. And obviously in the last few years, that's been squeezed as well.
In terms of people's capacity to pay for tickets for theatre shows.
Yeah, capacity to spend, and also particularly since COVID, there's been a big shift in the routine, not the routine, or the process of going out.
Yeah,
I think people leave it very much to the last minute, which can be really stressful for us.
Mm-hmm. Have we sold any tickets for today's performance or not?
Yeah. But also during lockdown, families learnt that they could make moments of memory together without spending all their money. So they bought into streaming and sort of home-based activities, and that realizing that actually that's quite rewarding as well. You know, sitting down together and watching a film is good. You know, probably cinema is feeling the same effect. You know, that people are actually now quite happy to stay at home and have that same experience. Particularly now, most people have a TV that would fill
a cinema.
Yeah. Our shifting pattern, our flexibility has enabled us to carry on.
Yeah.
That's our earned income.
And then more recently, though, so you have had grant income.
We've always
Arts Council
Arts Council Awards for all.
Other little bits.
We once got some European funding, but not a big amount. It was a project that was happening. So opportunities arise and you sort of jump on them. A couple of commissions where other people have got funding, we've gone in and delivered for them or created the project. Very much project by project. And then we became a charity, spent about a year once we were a charity sort of working out actually what that meant, how it works. And then now we're sort of very much more projecting forward our clear ideas and including in that things like core costs and running costs and the maybe trying to relieve some of the panic of not having anything in the account.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah, big dream for any charity.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to hear a little bit about why you took that decision at that point, because like you said, a lot of arts companies don't need to be constituted as a charity.
Yeah.
Why did that seem right for you guys? Has it actually been of benefit? Have you drawn more money as a result, do you think? Opened it to different sources? But
so we were a company limited by guarantee, which when we set up, there wasn't CICs and there wasn't interest, you know, these different sort of marginal edges of charity.
So that's a step away from being a private limited company, limited by shares.
Yeah. So
limited by guarantee means
basically that if firstly you're limited, so you're not personally liable, but also it means that the profit you make should be given at the end of, if the company folded, and if assets and profit would go to another similar organisation. So it's not.
So it's similar to a charity in intent.
Yes,
but not the legal structure.
Yeah, and I mean that might have been our way we set it up. I'm not sure if that's generically the way. So why did we become a charity? People kept saying, "Why aren't you a charity?" It also coincided with Arts Council, another one of the sort of big benefactors, becoming incredibly competitive and really difficult. We were finding that as our earned income streams squeezed, so was our capacity to generate grants, generate income from grants, and so we had to make a decision. And the logical one was to become a charity and open ourselves up to the world of writing bids.
Like you said, there's a lot of bids you probably never could have qualified for without having a charity number.
Yeah. And I mean, even more recently, within the last couple of years, even some of those previously that we didn't have to have specific charitable status are now saying, no, if you're not a charity, you can't apply. So Foundation Derbyshire.
It's a collective of funds under one banner, basically.
Yeah, and so they manage them. In the past, being a company limited by guarantee, they were very happy with.
Yeah.
More recently, they've said absolutely not.
Okay.
You have to be a charity.
Okay.
And that's it.
Yeah.
So yes, everything was being squeezed. So we've become a charity, and hence why we're talking.
Okay. And like, honestly, do you feel like it's been a positive move? Would you say you have more financial stability than you did before?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah. So being a charity is not just an easy walk in the park and everything's rosy. There's a lot more reporting. There's a lot more the way the accounts the accounts have to be presented. The report at the end of the financial year is a big deal. We never had to do that. So there's a lot of work around the edges, and actually writing bids and the time it takes and the results, the success isn't very high. So it's not easy. And this comes back, I think, what it's really enabled us to do, not only is we've definitely got more money, but that's 100% fact.
Yeah.
Not significantly more, but it's shifted from.
But like the last couple of years, you've been paying yourselves regular salaries, rather than we have some money, let's draw some.
I think we've always managed to keep that going.
Okay.
But the difference is, if we weren't a charity now, we wouldn't be able to pay ourselves recently because there's been so little work around. And whereas, go back to education, if we were short, we'd say, let's do a month of schools. And you'd send out
some flyers
within, couple of months. You'd have 3 or 4 weeks of 2 shows a day or 1 show in a workshop in a school a day. We did 4 to 5 days of the week doing that.
Yeah.
If it was only 2 in 1 week, we'd think, God, that's a bit quiet. It was easy. Really, and that enabled us just to carry on, and then we'd finish that. With some of that money, we'd create the next show. We'd look at doing another lantern procession or parade in the village or the community we were working with. It sort of flowed much easier. So that's gone. Charity arrives, and where we didn't have anything, but we haven't got that. Let's just generate a quick buck. The charity sits in the background and gives us a little bit regularly, or in that core,
which lets you keep doing the regular work that isn't necessarily income generating, isn't it? So you now do a lot of work that nobody would ever be able to pay for as well, don't you?
More and more. And we're actually thinking, we're seeing a lot of what we're doing now as, without it being free or very supported, very, very low cost to the end user, it would never be financially viable. Participation is not a cost efficient product. theatre shows can be if you've got a decent venue or you've got lots.
Yeah,
of
you sell hundreds and hundreds of tickets for it.
Yeah, fine. But if you're doing a workshop where the maximum you can have is 30, it's 1 or 2 hours. Let's say you've got an hour each side plus the travel. Suddenly,
and maybe you're working in a community of need,
yeah,
of whatever kind that doesn't have the means to pay much or anything.
Yeah, or if you do charge, particularly in some of the areas that we've been working in, what you'd result in is you wouldn't have 30, you'd have 2.
Yeah.
And unless they're paying 300 quid each, you know, that doesn't cost. That doesn't cover the cost of 2 leaders, or you know. And
can we talk a bit more again about the kinds of communities you work in? Because as you've said in passing, you have actually become, over the years, specialised in working with rural communities in particular.
Yeah.
And the needs of rural communities will be very, very different to urban communities in different parts of the country. And just a little bit about how have you ended up doing that, and what have you learned about what those communities experience that your work can then sort of speak to?
When we set up the company, we were all living in London, just finished college, university. And within a few months of trying to do something in London, we actually decided we actually preferred being in the countryside.
Okay.
So both, Phil and I, both 2 of the 3, were from rural parts of the world, and Tara was a Londoner. But we decided we would look at Devon, where my family were from, and Derbyshire, where Phil's family were from, and not London, where Tara's family was from. And we decided that Derbyshire was right for lots of different reasons. Very quickly, we started realising that we were getting so much from being in the countryside. When you're in a space where you can go for a walk, you can, you know, if you're not working and it's not working, if you can't work because you're struggling with a story or an idea, you go for a walk and often it'll just come to you. And
good place to be creatively.
Very good to be creative.
Yeah.
And then we started looking at presenting to our audiences, and we were thinking, we'll do a sort of Shakespeare, or, you know, perhaps what we were training.
One thing you've sort of cut yourself off from as soon as you've moved away from a city is populations of people, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if you're going to be a theatre company that relies on ticket sales for shows, rural areas are very sparsely populated.
Yeah, but I mean, Derbyshire has very high tourist levels, and there's an awful lot of cities within an hour and a half which come to the Peak District, beautiful part of the world. I think that what we've always sort of thought that the challenge is a lot of them come for walking.
Okay.
You know, they don't come for the mass population of coming to see theatre.
Yeah.
They come for the same reasons why we're here.
Yeah.
So we moved that. Yes, we definitely ended up in an area where there was less people, so it was fewer areas. But we started realising that we could build up a real good, strong core. We call it the tribe. It's basically the people who come to our shows.
Yeah.
They don't care what title it is because they know it's us and they know they'll get an experience that will give them something. And you know, that's kept us really going for so long, is this, when you get 4 generations from one family who come to a show, it's a really lovely feeling. And I mean, it shows we're getting older when parents come with their kids and they tell us that they came when they were kids. You know, we're aging, but it also is really good because it means there's longevity of what we're doing.
And that's interesting, I think. So there's some really nice stories you've told me. It'd be great if you could share 1 or 2 of them about people that you've met years later. Yeah. And just to illustrate the kinds of person that your work is speaking to, I think.
Okay.
In this area.
Well, there's a really good story of we were doing an event in Buxton, Spring Fair, and the lady walked up. I recognised her, and with her was an probably her early 20s, her daughter, it turned out. But I recognised the older lady, the mum, and she, and then it came to me. It was from a project we'd done years and years ago in Bamford, and she'd been one of the organisers. She'd been pregnant at the time.
Okay.
And the young lady who was with her, her daughter, actually was not the one in her tummy, but
the big sister.
The big sister.
Yeah.
And she basically had never forgiven the baby that was born on the day of the event that we'd been working on, because she never saw the ending.
Okay.
But the 2 weeks that we'd worked on in that community inspired her to carry on, and she became a fashion designer, and she said that she thinks it's because of what she did with us in those early days, and the idea that you can do something like that.
And it can be a job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she then came and did work experience with us on one of our shows and made the costumes for us, and a really lovely sort of complete all the way around, you know.
Yeah.
From inspiration. You know, we talk about that you spark an idea or you inspire someone to do something. And this is great funding speak, isn't it? You spark an idea, aspiration offers a change from where you are now. It's something that you don't expect you could ever do or you could ever see.
Yeah.
And it just enables that little pathway to perhaps become clearer. And then if you follow it, it's amazing. In reality, with funding, you get a bid that lasts a year. You can never see that.
You're never going to be able to report
18 years later.
Yeah. So actually talking about impact reporting and stuff, you said a bit earlier you are having to report a lot more.
Yeah.
Can feel like a chore, I imagine.
Yeah, I think it is.
I'm putting words in your mouth just because of having worked with lots and lots and lots of charities.
Yeah.
Impact reporting very often feels like a chore.
It's what it is the frustration of knowing that you have to. So if you've created a moment where you've told someone a story, or you've retold their story back to them, you create a moment where there's
some magic's happening.
Yeah, it's something that's beyond just presenting an idea and doing it. It's something that happens, a connection that you have. We've always struggled at the end to say, thanks very much. Would you mind just filling out this and telling us why you're here, and if you paid to come and see us again, or how far you've travelled, and so
what the carbon footprint of your journey.
Oh, that's even more so now. Yeah. But so that side of things is always very sticky. It doesn't feel like a good ending.
Yeah.
We have experimented over the years. We did graffiti boards, which was really successful, big chalkboards that people could write on. We've tried just getting people to put their hands up and taking a picture at the end. So we've got sort of visual data. We've also, some of the most effective actually is when we can afford it, we bring another person in who just goes around asking questions. But that's really challenging when you haven't got enough money to pay everyone. You then have to pay something that doesn't feel like it's actually.
I think if it feels like it is just for the funder, I think that's what's quite interesting is whether there's being able to reframe it as making sure that you understand that the work you're doing is making a difference. First and foremost, and it's sort of like a byproduct is we can tell the funders about it. Then it becomes a bit more interesting, doesn't it?
And we've sort of found that we're finding it more and more. So we did some training around storytelling evaluation methodology. It's really nice because so rather than saying our data is driven by quantity, so we're saying we had 100 people and they traveled from here. What we're saying is actually, we'll try and identify a couple of people who've got time to give us more. And in that, you interview them basically and ask them in more detail how it's affected them, what changes they've experienced. You're not saying, has it made you feel better in yourself? Is your mental health better? Do you feel less isolated? You're just waiting. There's a few trigger questions which hopefully lead into those sorts of things. But the results are really rich. You get maybe 2 sides of A4, which can just be brilliant. And I would argue more beneficial,
more meaningful than a
real story,
bums on seats.
And in terms of evaluating back, if that was acceptable, it's not for everyone, but if you could say, this is our findings.
Arts charity in particular doesn't have such easy measurables like a food bank can give stats of how many people it's fed this month, how many, like those sorts of things. You don't do that as such, do you?
We have got a clicker. We have got a clicker.
Yeah, but you have some, like there's 20 kids come to the youth group every Saturday. There's some of those things, but they're just measures of activity. So we did some stuff, people came to it. It's not really getting to the heart of any difference that's been made. So I think it's
a combination. It's a balance between the two. So the weekend just gone, we did an event in Glossop.
Yeah.
We were workshops and a walk around character, Lady of the Loom.
Oh yeah, I want to ask you about that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And what we had was the workshop bits. We had a clicker, and everyone who was working, we had 4 people behind in our gazebo. Mm-hmm. And basically every time anyone came in, you clicked it. So we know how many people came and interacted. Yeah. And what's lovely, anecdotal, but we're finding that if you invite them, it's children that tend to come forward, mm-hmm. and parents will get involved if you invite them. Yeah. So we're finding that really nice. But then when you're walking around with this giant puppet on my back, it's very difficult to do that. You can't clicker because you have moments where some people don't want to come too close, but they want a photograph.
She's freaky.
Yeah, if you like it like that. Or you have something where you have 3 or 4 minutes with one person.
Yeah.
But there's a huge area that sees that.
Yeah.
That.
And you're not going to go interview all of those people and ask them, what did you... No. It's really tricky, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think the more confident you guys get with telling that story, you are the experts, actually. In participatory theatre, you are right up close with the person experiencing it, aren't you? And you're the best placed person, rather than some external evaluation, you're the best placed person to say, I saw that child's face light up when I...
Yeah.
So actually...
And we're trying to grab that. So now after each event, we do a little bit of data. So we have number, sometimes estimate, but you have a fairly accurate estimate. Like walk around, you kind of know if there was 2,000 people at the event, you know that probably 40% have seen you. Yeah. Maybe only 10% have interacted, but you know that there's good, decent data on that estimates. We also have the workshop leader or the lead or the actor, any observations or moments that they gathered.
Yeah.
And sometimes, so a couple of months ago, we did more than that, last year, a piece where one lady wrote on a postcard. It's called Post Office of Possibilities. She wrote something on her letter to her future self. And she just said, I've never told anyone this before. And she posted it into our letterbox, sort of the future self would see it. And she just said, and then she had a cry. And she said, that was lovely, thank you. And then she left. And we didn't rifle for a read it or anything like that. But it was that is like a lovely moment.
Yeah.
And you think, actually, we've allowed that to happen.
And it's, I suppose, actually, it's then that's doing, like we said earlier, it's doing that thing of it's letting you know that your work is making a difference in people's lives.
Yeah.
But also, as a byproduct, you have some really rich material with which to fundraise so that you can do more of the work, so that that kind of virtuous cycle, I suppose.
Yeah. So it's remembering after your event to write the numbers, to put the data in,
capture those little stories,
and take a picture or two if you can.
Yeah. Tell me a bit about the Lady of the Loom.
Yeah, sure.
So
okay. So the Lady of the Loom is a puppet where the body, her head is about that big. So the idea, this bit in blue is me standing up, and her head is sort of down here, and then her big body, and then we built a sort of backpack over the top. So that is what we were aiming for. So this was the drawings, initial early ideas, with some sort of backpack on the back, and we weren't quite sure exactly what it was going to be. We worked with some young people to come up with designs and ideas for the heads.
So young people who had what relationship to your theatre company?
None. We just sort of did a call out and said, if you're interested
in taking part in making some
yeah, because we've got a youth theatre.
Yeah.
We're just about to launch what we're calling the lab.
Mm-hmm.
Got a tagline that we're just trying to work out. Tara wants to make cool shit.
Okay.
But we're not sure. I'm not sure if that's right, but I think it's nice for teenagers.
Yeah.
But between us, we designed this. So this is, my head would be up here. The idea is that there's this old lady who's the Lady of the Loom, or we're going to change the title.
Why Loom? What's the... And
that was because it was a Derbyshire make.
And that's where the funding came from.
Yeah.
In this instance.
A third of it.
A bit of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So because we think there's good value in it, we're going to call it the Story Weaver.
Okay.
And she's gathering people's stories.
And because it's just for people listening, or Derbyshire has a history with textiles and mills and things.
Yeah, lots of mills.
Yeah.
So hence the mill angle. So that's what we worked out, and then we were sort of trying to design what might go on the back. So these sort of sketches, and then everyone who's working with us did sketches. We did 3D models of little maquettes. We call them like little heads out of clay, which then I took their little heads and I took the best bits and blew it up to the big scale.
Yeah.
Made a large scale one.
And she's made of
this.
This is effectively paper mache, is it?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. So these are both. So it's paper mache, one layer of paper mache, and then a layer inside, which is J-cloth and plaster of Paris. So you get this really, really rock hard, very light, strong face you can make. So this one was where I learnt it on a course in the Midlands, and then that same process we used on the lady. Obviously, her head's.
But it means that she remains fairly light as well for you to.
She's still pretty light. I mean, it's pretty grueling doing it for too long.
Okay.
But in there, so with the one we've got, her eyes blink. We've decided she doesn't speak, but we've got an audio soundtrack inside, which I trigger from inside, so we have different sounds according to what we're doing. We're just toying. We're sort of always developing, so we're now thinking: should she speak? Okay. So could it be her memories? So maybe with a bit of reverb inside, I've got a mic, so I can say things. So I've also got an assistant with me who rushes forward and says, "Oh, she loves your jacket."
Okay.
And then they have little sections of fabric and buttons which are handed out to people. Again, though, we're having the same thing of people. It seems incredibly popular with older ladies. The Lady of the Loom, and they reference it, and then they sort of go, yeah, I've got some reference, or I'm some story linked to it. It's one of those. It's the moments where you spark an idea that could lead so quickly or so easily into more. There isn't time when you're wandering around with a puppet on your back, but it's bringing that into...
And so it's an unexpected... You didn't know who's going to really click with this.
Yeah, and we thought it'd be great.
Some of the children have been scared of it.
Scared. Dogs growl.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's... With teenagers, it's hilarious if they get a bit scared because they sort of scream. Yeah. Particularly the girls. So you can just sort of move a little bit and then they scream, run away, and that's sort of quite funny.
Yeah.
But with young ones, it's finding how close can you get comfortably. And there was a little girl in a chair on Saturday. She actually gave it a hug, and that was really, really good. And others are terrified.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's a massive, great big head.
Yeah.
She's got a huge bottom. So can't come right out from behind me. So, yeah.
So that's just a really nice. I mean, some people might watch this, others are listening, but I think it's just a really nice illustration of a lot of the stuff you've been talking about. It's large scale, so it's not like
we're not like, large scale, because it's
not like you've brought giant sort of when I say large scale, what comes to mind is this thing I saw in London years ago, the Sultan's elephant.
Yeah.
Which was enormous.
Deluxe. Yeah. Huge things.
You're not doing it on that level.
No.
But it's a sort of a larger than life stuff, isn't it?
I think even if it's people.
Yeah.
We play characters which are large.
Very exaggerated fun characters that people interact with. They're not just sitting watching a show.
We try to be,
even your shows, people aren't just sitting passively watching.
We do try and interact with the audience a lot.
There was a seed of the reason the Lady of the Loom is called that is because of some of the funding that came towards it, not all of it. So where's the other? How else has that show been paid for? The goodness of my heart.
Pretty much. Well, we've already sold it a few times.
Because you've had some spin out from that.
Yeah. So this weekend was the one that was sort of a part of the commission.
Okay.
The people we went and performed for, they topped it up. To travel costs, and the volunteers and the workshop element was they paid for.
Okay.
But the puppet itself we sold 3 times, so it's just a walk around piece.
Yeah.
Whereas theatre is shrinking in the world, it seems like it's really difficult in the theatres and performing wise. Street art,
at things like festival, things people are already coming together for. Yeah.
Kind of feels like a bit of an easier sell.
Okay.
But what we're not interested in, the Lady of the Loom arrived because we didn't want to have another walk around giant puppet that just walked around and didn't do anything. We wanted something that could interact, invited people to. There was something more than that.
You don't just stand and watch it.
Yeah.
Oh, that was cool.
Yeah.
You have something to do with it, and You've talked a lot about what it's been like to keep an arts company afloat in different circumstances over quite a long period of time, which is interesting, isn't it? Because I think you've had to adapt as the sort of economic climate changes.
Yeah.
But you're still at the heart of it doing the same work you were doing 26 years ago.
Yeah.
Effectively.
Pretty much,
with the same sorts of people.
Yeah.
Having the same sorts of change in people's lives as a result. So is there anything you could say that anybody listening who is like, okay, I really relate to that, I run a similar company or charity, or maybe someone who doesn't run an arts charity but can relate to that feeling of like, we're still doing the same thing. The young people in my community need a youth club every Wednesday night and have done for the last 50 years, whatever.
Yeah. But
the funding... It's sort of like, I suppose, that sort of creativity and imagination and adaptability. What would you say to encourage anybody in?
So if you're fresh to it, be flexible. Don't decide that this is the only thing you're going to do. Know that sometimes you do things you don't really want to do.
Mm-hmm.
But so long as you have the same desire to do whatever it is, the best that you can. Everything matters. When you've been doing it for a long time, every so often we get imposter syndrome where we think, why are we still here, sort of feeling.
Okay.
But then I go to meetings, and Tara and I were at one this morning, and as we left, Tara said, God, we really do know our stuff. And it's like, we really do now. And I think it's about not being arrogant, but realizing that when you've done it for a long time, you have to be good. There has to be things you're doing which others could learn from. I love the idea that we can share that. I think that's really valuable. And I think that particularly in the third sector, you tend to be quite open with what you're willing to share. But I go further than that. I think it should be for it. And everyone in every profession should be prepared to share what they do in as most open way that they can to help other people, particularly young people coming up.
It enriches everybody, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it gives you a spark. It brings back the memory of, there's that, that early years when you just stay up till 4 a.m. and then go and do a show the next day. That love of it, the drive. I think keep going.
Good, thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks very much, Mark. Thank you, Lady of the Loom, for joining us. If you've enjoyed this episode, we'll be back very soon with another episode of Bigger Slice, exploring how life looks like in small charities.